Dr. Bo Miedema, Professor and Director of Research, Dalhousie University, Family Medicine Teaching Unit, Fredericton, Adjunct Professor, Sociology Department, University of New Brunswick in Fredericton.
Well, we are engaged in a number of projects. One is called the Quality COPS, or the Quality and Cost of Primary Health Care. That is a national study, and I'm the lead here in New Brunswick. And we have surveyed family physicians and their patients about all kinds of aspects of primary care and the value of primary care. So this is an international study. It started actually originally in Holland, and many European countries have taken part in it, as well as Australia and New Zealand. And so that allows us to do a lot of comparison between all those countries, because those countries have similar primary healthcare systems, but there are also a lot of differences. And Canada has a very strong primary healthcare system, but of course there are also some weaknesses in the sense that, for example, we have a shortage of family physicians. And if you have, quote unquote, a gatekeeper system, meaning that you have to go to a family doctor to be referred to a specialist, you have to have enough family physicians to do that. So this project, Quality COPS, will then allow us to compare wait times and how patients feel about their primary healthcare provider, and allows us to compare between all those countries. So we are just in the stages of analyzing that data across the country. We are very pleased that we were awarded a grant by CIHR, Canadian Institute for Health Research, for the SPORE network. The SPORE stands for Strategic Patient-Oriented Research. So a number of us in the province of New Brunswick, we worked to get this grant, and the New Brunswick Health Research Foundation is a co-funder of this grant. So CIHR now requires in many projects one-on-one matching funding. So the New Brunswick Health Research Foundation has provided that matching funding. So the intent of this project is that we create a network with all the stakeholders in primary health care in New Brunswick, sit around the table and come up with projects to see if we can assess some of ongoing primary health care models, if we have to look at new models, and how we can improve primary health care, particularly for patients with complex needs. In New Brunswick, we have a lot of elderly. We have a lot of elderly people with complex needs. And so I think it's very important to do this research in the province. I think the beauty of the SPORE initiative is that we can sit around the table with all the stakeholders, because we have gotten research money to do that, thanks to New Brunswick Health Research Foundation.
Dr. Marc Surette, Professor of Biochemistry, New Brunswick Innovation Research Chair in Biosciences, Université de Moncton. Professeur au département de chimie et de biochimie de l'Université de Moncton et titulaire d'une chaire de recherche du Canada en métabolisme cellulaire des lipides.
My research involves lipid metabolism. So we look at how cells handle lipids, and I'm not talking about depot fat where you put on calories. I'm talking about the type of lipids that you find in a cell, and more specifically in cell membranes. And the reason we're interested in those is that these lipids are very important in cellular communication, so how cells communicate with each other. And that's important for the proper functioning of our bodies, of our immune system, and other organs. Another reason that we're interested in studying cell lipids is that these lipids can be manipulated by diet. So there's a way that you can have preventive measures to prevent certain diseases through dietary means. And what we focus on in our lab is dietary omega-3 fatty acids. And we've developed a new dietary oil with a commercial partner of ours. It would be an oil that could replace fish oils as a preventive measure for inflammatory diseases. Fish oils right now, one of the problems is that the worldwide demand is going to soon outpace supply, so we need alternative sources. So we've developed this plant that's a natural plant. It's not genetically modified. That could be a renewable resource for omega-3 fatty acids for use in foods or as dietary supplements. This year we've published what I believe is an important paper where we identified some genes that are involved in how cells handle lipids when cells are proliferating, so when they're actively dividing. We think that these genes could be targeted as therapeutic targets for treatments of certain diseases where cell proliferation goes on uncontrolled, like in cancers and certain autoimmune diseases like lupus, for example. We've also started a clinical trial this year to investigate a new dietary oil, a new dietary source of omega-3 fatty acids. So we've got the accord from Health Canada to go ahead with this clinical trial. And it's the first time that this oil has been given to humans, so we think that's a milestone, an important milestone in the development of this new product. The NBHRF is important in a number of ways. First of all, they provide funding for students, and students or anyone working in the lab is a major expense to us. So anytime we can get funding to help support their activities is very important. Another thing that's been very important for the NBHRF, for researchers in New Brunswick, is that they often provide seed funding or funding for projects to get the projects off the ground. And that's really important because those data are the data that we use to go to national competition. So it's made New Brunswickers a lot more competitive at the national level.
Dr. Vet Lloyd, Associate Professor in the Department of Biology at Mount Allison University.
So what we do is we work on epigenetics. So epigenetics is a topic that may sound fairly arcane and erudite to a lot of people. So to give you some concrete examples of what we do is we're working with 4 major model systems. Drosophila, everyone's favorite little lab buddy. We work with a fungus that attacks wheat, so that's very important in terms of making sure people still have food to eat. We work with ticks. Ticks are very important in terms of being a vector for pathogens. Lyme disease is the best known of those pathogens. And then we work with cancer cells, which don't really need much explanation in terms of human health. We've had progress in all of those fields. The cancer work, the fungus work, what we're doing is we're trying to modulate epigenetic gene expression. Epigenetic modulation allows us to control the behavior of the cancer cells. Probably the major advances have been in terms of the Lyme disease research. We've made a lot of progress this year finding new sites of risk within New Brunswick. So to use the Lyme disease as an example, one thing we've been doing this summer is I've had a field crew, the tick patrol, go out through the province, dragging little fuzzy blankets across the province, which sounds silly. What we're doing is we're finding ticks, so we're monitoring where those ticks are, which translates directly into a risk to human health. Now, based on that, we've made a very detailed map of where the high-risk areas are so that the message can now go out from public health to be extra vigilant. Another major accomplishment would be our analysis of exactly what Lyme disease bacteria is present in New Brunswick. The tests that are designed to figure out if someone has Lyme disease or not, there's a simple blood test. It's designed to pick up an American strain of the bacteria because that's where the test originated. The test is testing for the wrong strain of bacteria. And this is a very simple graph here. These white strain is what the test detects. The black strain is another strain that the test doesn't detect. Mostly in New Brunswick, we have either the black strain or called N40 or a hybrid of the two. New Brunswick Health Research Foundation has been very generous in terms of supporting students working in my lab over the course of not just this past year, but previous years. That's an invaluable experience because frequently when you have federal grants, yeah, it's wonderful, but by the time you've bought all the reagents, you can't pay summer students. So that allows students to get into the lab to actually experience research They can go on then to do their senior undergrad year and honors degree. Many go on to do graduate work. So it gets them into the lab early so they can see what this research stuff is about.
Dr. Kevin Engelhardt, Director of the Institute of Biomedical Engineering, Professor of Electrical and Computer Engineering at UNB.
My life as a researcher involves interacting with both a group of clinical professionals and researchers and students. So our research here involves interaction between fundamental research, engineering research, and clinical applications of that. So it's really the best of both worlds. You get to do fundamental research and trying to understand how the neuromuscular system works, and applied research and how to use that knowledge to make the control of artificial limbs better. Fundamental research in learning how to extract and decode information from the central nervous system is really still it's the central theme of what we do. This is still a very challenging thing, not just for artificial limbs, but interacting with any device that someone might want to use, whether you're an amputee or someone with tetraplegia. There's all kinds of applications that would benefit from tapping into the central nervous system. So we're conducting fundamental research into understanding how the brain controls movement and how the brain integrates sensory information to do the really sophisticated things that we're capable of with intact limbs, and then try to replicate that. This year's been pretty exciting. We've been able to develop a relationship with a company making exoskeletons. So for the next 5 years, we're going to help make exoskeletons a clinical device for people with mobility challenges. We have a new research chair in medical devices and technologies, and he's going to help companies do research with our group to create the next generation of devices that can monitor your health and put healthcare into the hands of people much better. It's essential to have funding within the province because we have two fundamental needs. We have to sustain the capacity to do the research, and we need to be able to attract the best students to conduct the research. These are the two essential elements of any research program, and it's especially true of our group. The NBHRF has been essential for the kind of research that we've been doing. They've been extremely important, particularly in recent years, allowing us to attract some of the best faculty from around the world to become members of our research group, to be able to fund the students, to be able to provide the base funding for some of the fundamental research that we're trying to do. So funding sources are critical for our mission.
Dr. Deborah K. Vanden Hunard, PhD, Professor of Gerontology, Canada Research Chair in Qualitative Research and Analysis at St. Thomas University.
I work on a variety of different projects from time to time, so I'm mainly working to see how has widowhood changed for women as society has changed and women have changed over the last 20 years. When I'm really deep into the research, then I'll be going out with my recorder and my interview guide and interviewing people about their experiences, because I strongly believe that people are experts in their own lives. So it's important, if you want to study widowhood, to talk to widows. And so that's always a part of my life when I'm right into the research. A lot of times when people study aging, they come from the idea that old people are sad and lonely and helpless. When I first started studying widows, particularly, people would say, oh, that must be so depressing. But really, what you find out when you study widows is that older women are creative and resilient and strong. So I think seeing old people as human beings, as capable human beings, as widows, as widowers, whatever, is the most important thing, and not just a bunch of sick people that we have to be scared of. I've been really fortunate to have the time and the funding to look at experiences of aging from a sociological perspective and really doing in-depth qualitative studies. So once again, it's very important that older people are given a voice in research. Mostly people talk to doctors, experts about aging, but a lot of the way people experience aging, the experts don't know. They are the experts in their own lives. So being able to carry out that research, and so in my own studies, I've done the first major and really the only study of women's experiences as widows, and then followed that up by a study of widowers, and so men's experiences with losing their spouse. My focus is on aging, and so it's not narrowly on health, but certainly those things are very deeply connected. Most research on aging, and almost on anything in Canada, is done in the big cities, at the big universities, and in urban areas. We know so little about the experiences of people in smaller centers like Fredericton, in smaller rural areas. And it's very vital that policies are developed based on what's really happening here. When New Brunswickers apply for funding on the national stage, they're competing with people across the country. When you look at the applications from some of the larger provinces, there's a lot of funding at the provincial level, and that means that when we go into those competitions, unless there's funding in New Brunswick, people will look at our records and they'll say they're not good enough. And so we really need to prepare both students to compete nationally, but also for researchers to be able to get some of those larger grants, those national grants, and then to allow our research to become well known around the country and internationally.
Dr. Barbara D'Entremont, Professor of Psychology at UNB Fredericton.
Right now, we're looking at the early intervention programs in the province of New Brunswick and for preschoolers with autism, and we're doing something called a cost effectiveness study. So what we're doing is we're looking to see how well the preschoolers are doing in New Brunswick, but we also are doing it in partnership with Nova Scotia. We're looking at preschoolers when they start their therapy and 1 year later. We're looking at kind of how much improvement there is and what is the cost of that therapy, providing that therapy. So we have government partners, we have, we're also interviewing parents to see what their out-of-pocket costs are as well. And so we'll be able to do that comparison across the two provinces. We are collecting data from all of the autism intervention agencies across New Brunswick and all of the autism intervention teams across Nova Scotia. And so really just being able to interview the parents, see the children, and just kind of see how they're doing. We don't have any data from that because we're still doing the ongoing collection. We did do a pilot study where we saw how well the children were doing within that 1 year. And in New Brunswick, what we found is that almost all of the children made progress, meaning that their cognitive skills were better, or their day-to-day living skills were better, or they showed less autism symptomatology. So almost all children showed progress. About almost, I would say almost a quarter of the children showed average functioning, which meant that on standardized tests, their scores were in the average range, and they were no longer showing symptoms of autism in the clinical range. So it was really nice to see that amount of improvement. So New Brunswick has done a really nice job in providing early intervention for preschoolers, and we've been doing that since about 2004. I think what we need to do now is we need to start to focus on school-aged children and adults and make sure that we're getting the right services for them and that they're able to get the services that they need so that we're able to improve the lives of New Brunswickers with ASD across the lifespan. We wouldn't be able to see the preschoolers that we're seeing in terms of doing the direct assessments with them before therapy and a year later. We wouldn't be able to do that without NBHRF. They've provided the funding for that whole portion.
Dr. Sarah Paxad, clinical neuropsychologist and professor at the School of Psychology, Université de Moncton, neuropsychologue clinique et professeur à l'école de psychologie de l'Université de Moncton.
En gros, je m'intéresse à la démence et les liens entre les maladies chroniques et la démence, bien sûr. Et je dois dire qu'on était parmi les premiers, mon équipe, à mon laboratoire, à pouvoir identifier les liens très clairs entre le diabète de type 2 et la démence et les troubles de mémoire en particulier. Pourquoi la démence? Pour plusieurs raisons. Une des raisons, c'est que la littérature continue à nous démontrer que 50% des gens qui sont atteints de démence ne sont même pas au courant qu'ils sont en train de développer la démence. Deuxièmement, la littérature scientifique nous démontre également que les patients qui sont atteints de démence sont non seulement sous-diagnostiqués, mais sont sur-hospitalisés. Donc il y a quelque chose qui ne fonctionne pas et on s'est donné à mon laboratoire comme mission d'étudier la situation au Nouveau-Brunswick, de comprendre qu'est-ce qui se passe et pourquoi il se passe de cette façon-là. Tout ce programme de recherche a abouti à une collaboration plus active au niveau pan-canadien pour pouvoir en fait mieux informer la population aînée du Nouveau-Brunswick, francophone et anglophone bien sûr, mais aussi contribuer à la formation et aux connaissances des médecins de famille pour pouvoir faire le diagnostic approprié et autant que possible précoce de la démence, et tout ça afin d'offrir une meilleure qualité de vie à nos aînés. Je dois dire que l'accomplissement de ce projet et l'obtention de cette subvention est grâce au soutien vraiment constant et continuel de la Fondation de recherche en santé du Nouveau-Brunswick qui nous a appuyés depuis plus d'1 an dans ce projet-là, non seulement dans toutes nos activités de réunion et de la préparation de ces réunions-là, de la mise en place et réseautage des acteurs majeurs pour l'obtention de cette subvention, mais aussi avec un appui financier qui vient de la Fondation. Nous sommes très très fiers de l'appui de la Fondation, puisque personnellement je pense que on ne se sent plus seul devant son ordinateur, dans son bureau, à tout faire seul pratiquement ou avec ses collègues seulement. On a l'appui d'une fondation qui est à notre écoute et qui nous appuie dans tous les domaines.
Dr. Bill Morrison, Associate Professor of Educational Psychology, Co-Executive Director of Health and Education Research Group, Faculty of Education, UNB Fredericton, President-elect, NB College of Psychologists.
Largely our research, or my research, is focused on school health and has been since 2002. Our interest primarily is on applied research that makes a difference in terms of policy and practice. So with an interest in students and families and communities, and in particular on what makes quality of life for these students, what contributes to resiliency or strength. Initially, when I first started research, we focused on school health, and we actually looked at tobacco control. We were looking at risk factors associated with what places people at risk to smoke or to use tobacco. And that was our early days, and we looked at a lot of risk factors. And over the course of the years, we expanded our work in health research to actually look at health eating, physical activity, and finally mental health and positive mental health. One of the really highlights, I guess, of working at Health and Education Research Group, starting in 2006, we actually followed 40,000 children and youth in New Brunswick through the New Brunswick Student Youth Health Survey, actually New Brunswick Wellness Survey that we created in collaboration with the government of New Brunswick. And we followed students over the course of time, not just looking at risk, but also protective factors. And what we're really excited about is that survey, that feedback system has now become part of government. So the surveillance of youth health behavior has become part of decision-making processes. So we're excited about what's happened there. We've had a chance to work with the government in identifying things that will be useful for informing practice and policy. So we're interested in practices that actually create positive mental health environments. And that's probably the most exciting thing we're currently involved in and working not just in New Brunswick, but across Canada. Having an organization such as the New Brunswick Health Research Foundation provides opportunity for promoting applied research and evaluation. It means that researchers are not siloed or in these grand institutions but have no relevance to the community. When we have a chance to actually promote what's happening, we realize there's so many good things working together. And really what that means is that dollars can be used meaningfully. They can be targeted toward things that are important in terms of quality of life in New Brunswick. They can address areas of strength and capacity of our youth, children, and families. So I think it's important that we have organizations such as that.
Dr. Lucia Sullivan, Professor in the Department of Psychology, UNB Fredericton, Director of the Experimental Program in Psychology, Canada Research Chair in Adolescent Sexual Health Behavior.
Well, in my last year, I've conducted a whole range of different projects. A lot of them with students. We've been studying infidelity, cyberstalking, even a study on kissing. But my largest studies have been on adolescent sexual health, particularly in New Brunswick high school youth, and also a longitudinal study I'm collecting on young adults, well, really late adolescents to young adults, 16 to 21, tracking them over time and looking at the onset of sexual problems. It is based on the amazing amount of research on the adult population, where we find 26% have some serious form of sexual dysfunction. And this is a study to really look at the progression of sexual problems from the early parts of a person's sexual life, or partnered sexual life anyway. I mostly collect that information using online surveys at this point, which have proven to be highly representative of large numbers of people. Involves a lot of online data, writing and analysis. And I get to work with students, graduate students, undergraduate students, and a lot of collaborators on projects. And so that's been a really, really good study. And another one that I think is going to be very important is a cross-Canada study that we're doing in partnership with the Public Health Agency of Canada of all the sexual health clinics in Canada. I think it's important to help young people develop sexual lives that are positive, rewarding, and healthy. One very key way we can do that is making sure that they are able to get the health care they need, that they have providers who give them access, who ask the right questions, who inquire if there are problems, and really encourage them to ask the questions in the first place or to seek help if they're having difficulties in some way. Well, MBHRF funding, I think, is very important because it really supports projects that are tailored for the New Brunswick context. It's having that local support that I think is absolutely essential for the researchers here.
Dr. Rodney Ouellette, président et directeur scientifique, Institut Atlantique de recherche sur le cancer, President and Scientific Director, Atlantic Cancer Research Institute.
One of the major research projects that the team is working on currently involves the technology that we developed a few years back that allows us to capture circulating microvesicles in biological fluids. Faire une longue histoire courte, ça nous permet de manière minimalement invasive d'aller chercher de l'information sur un cancer qu'on n'a peut-être pas encore diagnostiqué, qui peut nous dire s'il y a un cancer de présent, premièrement, et deuxièmement, peut nous informer sur la nature même du cancer, pour savoir si c'est un cancer plus agressif ou moins agressif. Et ensuite, on peut l'adresser de façon appropriée. Cette année a été une année très occupée pour l'Institut. On a utilisé cette technologie-là pour différents types de cancers, dont un où on est très fier des résultats, c'est au niveau du cancer de la prostate. So using a simple blood test, we've been able to extract microvesicles from these urine samples in patients, and we've been able to predict the presence of cancer in a much more sensitive way than existing tests such as PSA. And that provides us with a lot of hope that once we expand the test to a larger number of patients, that we will find something that is better than current state of the art in terms of diagnosing prostate cancer. La FRSNB, depuis son existence, a été un moyen très important pour les chercheurs dans le domaine de la recherche en santé d'aller chercher des fonds pour permettre à la recherche de continuer. Donc, c'est un mécanisme qui est très essentiel vu la nature compétitive du financement de la recherche en santé. C'est très important dans le contexte où, au Nouveau-Brunswick, on essaye de développer et de bâtir notre capacité en recherche en santé. Donc, nous, on a bénéficié de temps à autre de subventions qui nous ont permis de trouver des résultats préliminaires qui ensuite nous ont permis d'aller chercher des octrois nationaux, internationaux pour continuer nos études. Donc, la FRSNB est un outil essentiel dans le landscape du financement de la recherche en santé pour les chercheurs du Nouveau-Brunswick.
Dr. Denise Clark, Professor of Biology at UNB Fredericton.
The work we do is basic biomedical research, so it doesn't have a direct clinical application, but it's more related to figuring out basic biological processes that are of medical importance. We know a lot about the basics of metabolism, but what we don't understand very well is how it connects with processes like the development of an organism. What we're focusing on in my lab is the aspect of metabolism that has to do with making the basic building blocks that are part of DNA. So the reason that this is of interest to medicine is the effects of reducing purine synthesis at the cellular level in humans. Fruit flies have all the same genes involved in purine synthesis that humans do. And we've been looking at the effects of reducing purine synthesis in the fruit fly. Two main things that we found recently that are of interest are that reduced purine synthesis causes elevation in cell death during development. The other effect that we found is that the reduction in purine synthesis actually makes flies resistant to a specific kind of stress. And so currently we're looking for genes that are involved in mediating those responses in connection with purine synthesis. So that's where we are right now. I think it's important to have basic biomedical researchers in New Brunswick because that means that there's a critical mass of people to work on any particular problems that may be of specific interest to New Brunswickers, but also of interest and of importance to all Canadians. The MBHRF funding has helped me in two major ways. First, by providing me with funding to develop larger proposals to get federal research funding, for example, from CIHR, and also for providing funding for training students who are bound for medical school. So I also received funding for a summer student who then went on to the medical school in St. John.
Dr. Chris McGibbon, Professor, Faculty of Kinesiology, Research Chair in Rehabilitation Biomechanics at the Institute of Biomedical Engineering, University of New Brunswick in Fredericton.
So my main program is in movement biomechanics. So that's why we would do in this lab. And that typically involves looking at how people walk and jog or run or move about who don't have impairments, because then we learn what strategies people use to move. And then we also do research on individuals that have impairment. For example, limb amputation, which was actually a program that was funded by NBHRF a few years ago. As well as people that have stroke or multiple sclerosis, have difficulties moving. So by looking at how they move in a very detailed way, we can understand how they compensate for those impairments and help their physiatrist or a clinician manage their treatment programs. Now the other area is focus on balance. And so that research is more aimed at trying to determine how individuals with, say, a head concussion, for example, how their balance would be affected by that condition. And again, for the same purpose, to try to understand what could be done to help reduce those impairments. We learn a lot by doing research in here using these very sophisticated technologies. But we can't take those out to the field. We can't put these in a clinic. So at the Institute of Biomedical Engineering, we've developed a system called the Biotone system that is essentially a set of sensors that get placed on the body that communicate wirelessly with the system and deploy these in a rehabilitation setting such as the Stan Cassidy Center, which is one of our partners. Well, NBHRF has been quite valuable in terms of providing funds that otherwise probably wouldn't have been able to be acquired. For example, a few years ago, I had applied to the Canadian Institutes of Health Research for funding and through the Regional Partners Program. So I was successful in getting that funding, but the NBHRF provided the matching funds for that, and otherwise that research wouldn't have been able to be carried out without those matching funds, so it's quite critical. And they have other programs that we're also looking at to tap into.